Hello and welcome to Books and Writers Podcast at Promocave. If you like books or you write books, this podcast is for you. My name is Jorge and I am your host, and this is episode 2 of Books and Writers. And today we will explore, why are you a writer? Yes, why do you write? That is the topic for today. And the reason for the topic is simple. I'm a writer. I speak with a lot of writers. There's more than 150,000 members right now at promocave.com. And a lot of the questions that I get and a lot of the questions that they get is, why are you a writer? Why do you write? How do you get inspired? Not only that, but in the discussions that we have in the chat rooms, and when readers start collaborating, asking questions, interacting with writers, they always want to know about writers. Why do you write? They always want to know, what was your inspiration? How did you come up with a character or a topic or a book or a story or a villain? And today we will explore all of that. But I want to hear from you. I want to hear, why are you a writer? Please send your emails to podcast@promocave.com. Send me, why are you a writer? And in the topic, please put episode 2, why are you a writer? So that I know this was from episode 2 of the podcast. Now, there's a lot of different types of books. There's fiction, there's nonfiction, there's business, there's self-help, there's romance. So the reasons for people are vast. The reasons for writers are vast. Let me tell you about my experience. I wanted to be a writer probably since I was 12 years old, or at least that's what I can remember. That's as far as my memory goes, my writing memory. I wanted to be a writer since age 12. I was already writing at age 12, and I was writing essays, political essays, if you can believe it. I was also writing a lot of poetry. These were my teen or my preteen years. So a lot of poetry, reading and writing a lot of poetry. My mother wrote, and of course that helped. And I had more than 5,000 books at the house. So that helped a lot because I had a lot of reading. But I wanted to write because I thought it was a method of change. It was a method of getting to people, of inspiring. But it all boils down to change, because when you inspire, you change. When you tell a story, that person, especially if it's a good story, that person will not be the same person after the story. So that invokes change. At the time, I wanted romance. I wanted to inspire. I wanted to make people cry. That was part of my inspiration. And with some of my essays, it was change in government, change in society. At that age, back then, I was thinking of what if. I was always thinking of why. Why are the things the way they are? Why is the political system so bad? And remember, for those of you who already know me or have been reading my blogs, I was born and raised in Mexico, not in the US, but in Mexico, where, of course, the political system, society, economics was much different, especially back then when I was 12 years old. So I saw this and I said, I have to write about it to make a change. My first article was published at 12 years old, and it was an essay about politics. That's the way I started. And of course, I evolved. I like to write fiction, and I like to write nonfiction. My fiction is difficult. I have a difficult time, or more difficult time, writing fiction. Nonfiction for me is easier, or very easy. I have a couple of books already written on business and motivation, and I think it's easy. I am a natural teacher, a natural mentor. I'm always mentoring 2 or 3 people at a time. I like telling stories. I like explaining. I write a lot of articles as well on business, processes, marketing, that sort of thing. Very natural. In fiction, I like science fiction. I like fantasy, but writing, the most that I write at the moment is science fiction. And I think I'm really part of the solution when I write. I feel good. My body changes. It transforms. I feel my hormones bubbling, my happy hormones bubbling. It really makes me happy to write. And I feel that I'm making a change. When I'm working on other projects, sometimes I have fun, but I don't feel I am changing the world or changing society or changing people. When I write, I feel I'm truly working towards something greater. Some of the other reasons that you have given me, a lot of the writers, are teaching. A lot of you like to teach, and you teach with stories, with metaphors, with short stories, with novels, or with nonfiction. You teach with real life stories, or you teach lessons or subjects in your writing. And that's one of the main reasons that I've heard from writers of why they write, because they like teaching. A lot of you are in business, and you write your book because of business, because you want more business, you are marketing yourself, your services, or because simply you want to make a change in business. You want to make better managers, or you want to make better salespeople, or you have methods that you discovered and you want to share those methods in business. Maybe they are accounting, or maybe they are human resources, but business is a big one. Of course, in my experience, the business writer or the nonfiction business writer is a very, very different character than the fiction writer. I know of very few writers that write both. I am one of them, but if you're one of those, I want to hear from you. I want to hear your story and why you are a writer. So we have teaching, we have business. Another reason is that you feel you have a calling. Something is telling you to write. You can't help yourself. It's the universe. It's God. It's something else that it's bigger than you. And that's another reason that I've heard. I just can't help it. I just write. I feel I have to write. I write music. I write stories. I write plays. Some people just write and feel a calling. I feel a calling. Maybe it's genetics, and that's another reason. I think it could be in your genetic pool. My mother is a writer. My uncle is a writer. My grandfather is a writer. My cousin is he writes music. I have a lot of painters in my family, a lot of artists. So I truly think I also have it in my genes. And a lot of you have said that you come from a long family of writers. And of course, something happens when you come from a family of writers. You probably have a lot of books in your house and you read a lot. And that's part of the equation, not just genetics, but the fact that they push you to write. It's very important. Reading and writing is very important for those families. So they push you to write. They don't recommend. My mom didn't recommend. She pushed me to write, and she pushed me to read. And to this day, we talk about what we're reading, what we're writing, we share with each other. And then almost every time it turns into a philosophical discussion, which I like. Some of you like telling stories. And I don't know if it happens to you, but it happens to me. I live my life in narrative. When I'm doing something, I'm always thinking in narrative, such as Jorge was walking down the street, or Jorge was recording a podcast. I'm always thinking in narrative. Some of you may think in movies, and that's another way of thinking in story. So I'm always thinking in stories. I'm always looking at people as characters. So maybe that's what you do as well. Maybe you look at people as characters. Maybe You're always looking at a story or a movie in your head as you live life, or as you listen to a conversation, or as you are in a situation. Or maybe you have alternative endings to whatever situation you are in. You're in a meeting, you're at a party, you're at a restaurant, and you're thinking, oh, what if a spy came in and started shooting? That can be another reason. It happens to me. I want to hear from you. Don't forget to email me your stories and why you are a writer. You know, I heard from the writer Orson Scott Card that a lot of people tell him that they become writers because they read something and they loved it, or they read something and they hated it. So they read a story or a book, or they saw a movie and they said, this is an incredible movie. I am inspired to write stories. Or they read a book and said, this is an incredible book. It really moved me. It motivated me. I will start writing. Or the opposite. They went to the theater. They saw a bad movie and they said, oh my God, I can do a better job. And these people are doers, not just sayers. So they sat down and started writing. Or they read a really, really bad book or short story or something else and said, I can write a better book. And then maybe their husband said, well, why don't you write a better book? And they did. They sat down and they wrote a book. So these are some of the reasons. And I like that reason, by the way. And now whenever I'm reading a book, or whenever I'm watching a movie or something on TV or a magazine, an article, I always think the same thing. Can I write better than this person? Is this person doing an awesome job? Am I being inspired? Or is this a really bad writer and I don't know how he print this book or this article, or how they film this movie? I don't know who bought this script. I can do a better job. And most of the time I go home and I start writing. That's a great inspiration to start writing. So some of the reasons of why you are a writer, or why people become writers. You like teaching, maybe you're in business, or maybe you are a teacher and you want to give lessons to your students. By the way, one of the books that I wrote was because of that reason. I was on the phone 8 to 10 hours per day talking with people about a specific industry, and then I was tired. I was tired of speaking to people on the industry, and I said, I'm going to write a book. And if people don't read the book, I'm not going to get on the phone with them because they're not serious about their industry. So I wrote the book, and it became the only book, and it's still the only book in that particular industry. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote that particular book. It was as a teacher, as a mentor. Let me put all of the lessons. Let me put all of the experience. Let me put everything that I know into a book, and it will help people. And what I always told them is, it will shave 2 years off your learning curve. So that's the teaching. That's the teaching. The teacher, the writer, teacher, teacher, writer. Then we have business. We have the calling, right? You felt the calling from the universe, from God, from a muse to write. You love to tell stories, or you have it in you. Your father wrote, your mother wrote, your grandfather, it's in your genes. Or you loved or hated a story. Those are some of the top reasons, but I want to hear your reasons as well. I want to hear why you write. Why are you a writer? Please send me your story so I can talk about it in my next podcast. Send it at podcast@promocave.com. And don't forget the title. This is episode 2 of Books and Writers. So please put episode 2. Why are you a writer? So that I know it's from you, and that I know it's from the second episode of Books and Writers. And remember, we're going to be here every week, once a week, at least once a week. And once we start getting more interviews, we're going to interview a lot of writers in the podcast. Once we start scheduling the interviews, maybe we'll do twice or 3 times, because last time we did a schedule, we received a lot of authors that wanted to be on the podcast. And remember, if you're on the podcast, we have up to 3 million interactions per day with our social media. and we push our podcast into our social media. So it's a great platform for authors to get new readers. If you want to be interviewed also, please send us an email. We would love to have you in our podcast. Some of the topics that we'll explore in the next podcasts are reading, of course, why you read, what do you read, what do you read when you're writing habits, how many words do you write per day, and that sort of thing. In the discussion board, when we were talking about, I think I posted that I wrote 1,000 words a day when I write fiction. We had more than 1,000 of you giving us great ideas on how you write and how you went from 200 to up to 4,000 words per day. So we're going to talk about all of that in future podcasts. So stay tuned. We're going to entertain you, and maybe even you're going to learn something. So that's awesome. Thank you for being with me in Books and Writers podcast. This is Jorge Olson, your host. And remember, if you like books or you write books, this podcast is for you. I know your time is very valuable, and I am so happy that you decided to spend it with me. Thank you. Bye.